As LeBron James is likely to decline his second season option and hit free agency, there's a strange mix of feelings among the Cavs faithful. There is sadness, of course, that the guy largely responsible for getting the team its first championship is probably leaving his quote-unquote hometown team again, but he's doing so on much better terms than the first time around and presumably won't televise it. He made a promise, he delivered, he doesn't have much reason to stay in that regard. The question then is, where does he go and what impact does he have on whoever he joins? At his age, even considering the level he's still playing at and the extreme lengths he goes to take care of his body, LeBron is only going to help a team in the short term. It's not just because he's in his mid-30s and Father Time is undefeated, but because of something else. The Bron-erfly effect. No, I'm not mispronouncing the butterfly effect, and I'm aware of how stupid it sounds. While James's effect isn't quite as subtle in origin as in the butterfly effect, it's no less prominent, and there are two people primarily to thank for it: Dan Gilbert and Tim Duncan. Here's a brief history lesson and explanation of just what in the hell I'm talking about. James gets drafted number 1 overall in 2003 by the Cavaliers. The team gradually improves its record, but doesn't make the playoffs until after Dan Gilbert becomes the majority owner in 2005 and cleans house in the front office. For those who don't know, Gilbert currently owns not 1, not 2, but 3 Cleveland sports franchises: the Cavs, the Gladiators in the Arena Football League, and the Lake Erie Monsters of the American Hockey League. He's becoming almost unavoidable in the city. Anyway, James was initially signed to a 3-year rookie contract with a 4th-year option. So by the time 2007 hits and the Cavs had a brief appearance in the NBA Finals, James signed his second contract at 3 years, $60 million. What's interesting about this is that that wasn't the initial offer. The Cavs proposed a 5-year deal for $80 million, but James went for the higher annual salary and shorter length, marking a major shift in his priorities. Why didn't he take the longer deal aside from the higher short-term gain? The Bron-erfly effect. A small moment in time when his priorities as a player change, and it affects everyone on the team and in the organization. It took hold once LeBron got a whiff of the Larry O'Brien Trophy in 2007 and had a word with Tim Duncan afterward. Duncan told him that he loved how James was with his teammates, and added, quote, "Learn to drive these guys, because this is going to be your league in a little while." From this moment on, LeBron's career priorities shift, with winning a title being not just at the top of the list, but cemented there for the rest of his career. This happens with veterans a lot, namely in the later years, but for LeBron, this hit when he was just reaching his mid-20s, not even in his prime yet, either physically or in terms of his skill set. While he sees the Cavs as having potential for greatness, he also sees just how far he and his team have to go before they can realistically have a shot at a title, and his pressure on the team to make the right moves drastically increases. That year the Cavs had no picks as they'd all been traded away. That's alright though, they had 3 the previous year: Shannon Brown, Boobie Gibson, and Ejike Ogboaja. Was that even close? While Gibson did help the team get to the finals with a well-timed barrage of 3-pointers, Ogboaja, I'm probably not even close, played no regular season games with the Cavs, and Brown would get traded midway through the 07-08 season as part of a 3-team deal, which saw the Cavs get Ben Wallace, Joe Smith, Wally Zerbiak, and Delonte West, while giving up Drew Gooden, Shannon Brown, Cedric Simmons, Ira Newble, Donyell Marshall, and Larry Hughes. Hughes was supposed to shoulder a bigger offensive load, but that never really worked out. All but one of the players the Cavs acquired were much older than Gooden, who was a key role player at the time. This becomes a harbinger of things to come when talking about draft and trade acumen with LeBron's teams. Prior to that year, all the free agent signings were either off the team before the playoffs started, or only appeared during garbage time. That season ended with the Cavs losing in 6 games to the Celtics, who had acquired Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett before the season and went on to win a championship. The 08-09 season saw the Cavs finish with over 60 wins and a Central Division title. Part of that was due to acquiring Mo Williams in exchange for Damon Jones and Joe Smith, and drafting J.J. Hickson, who to summarize was like a younger Ben Wallace but with slightly better free throw shooting. Joe Smith would end up getting released and then signed back to the team later that season. The Cavs would lose in the conference finals to the Orlando Magic. By this point, I imagine LeBron taking a look around the locker room at the older guys like Wallace, Zerbiak, and Ilgauskas, a guy who was more metal than man below the knees at this point, and then looking at the younger guys who weren't able to shoulder the offensive load like Pavlovich, Hickson, Gibson, and Verjao, and just wondering if this team would ever make it back. 2009 to 2010. James can become an unrestricted free agent after this season. The Cavs used their first-round pick on Christian Ayenga, who didn't play with the team until January and would not get on the court in the playoffs at all. Then they picked Danny Green in the second round, only to waive him one season later. San Antonio thanks you, Cleveland. The Cavs trade fan-favorite rundown center Zydrunas Ilgauskas, along with Pavlovich, Wallace, and next year's first-round pick, for 34-year-old Anton Jameson, 34-year-old Anthony Parker, Sebastian Telfair, and the Witness Protection Program himself, Shaquille O'Neal, now a sprightly and youthful 38 years old. Oh, and Ilgauskas was re-signed after he got waived, so the net age of the Cavs roster continued to stay uncomfortably high. Despite winning 60-plus games and making the playoffs, the Cavs were once again stonewalled by Boston in the second round. While Cleveland sold out to do whatever they could to get the team over the hump while Boston's Big Three wrapped up their few seasons together, they ultimately couldn't secure much in the way of significant aid for LeBron, and he is in part to blame for that. Think about it. James was hush-hush about what he would do at the end of his contract. If you're a sought-after free agent NBA player who just hit or has yet to hit the 30-year mark, are you seriously going to consider offers from a team whose best player is showing signs he might leave after 1 or 2 seasons and which was struggling to get back to the finals by not drafting significant help or trading away picks, and revamping a significant portion of its roster with veterans in their mid-30s on short-term deals? Frankly, I wouldn't go for that either. James would go to Miami in a sign-and trade on a 6-year deal worth $110 million, taking a pay cut so he could play with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. But even then, James opts out of the contract after 4 years and eventually re-signs with the Cavaliers. He does this despite Dan Gilbert's ranting, raving experiment with Comic Sans he published after LeBron left, claiming Cleveland would win a championship before James. Obviously, that didn't happen, and it's still unclear how exactly Gilbert managed to convince LeBron to rejoin. The catch is, he only signs a 2-year, $42 million contract with the ability to opt out after 1 season, which he did. The contract after that, 2 years, $47 million with the ability to opt out after 1 season, which he did. Even after the Cavs won a title, James signed a 3-year deal worth $100 million with, wait for it, an opt-out on the last season. Why so many short-term deals? Well, aside from flexibility to go elsewhere if needed, James has his eye on something else: the NBA's salary cap, because money is his firm number 2 priority. For those not familiar with the NBA's salary cap system, here's the oversimplified version. Each team can pay X amount of money for all the players on its roster. This number is determined by the NBA's total revenue, so it fluctuates, and with it, the terms for a maximum contract any single player can receive. James is looking for when the cap is slated to rise, and making sure he can sign a new max contract when that happens. There's another caveat to the cap system though. It's a soft cap which can be exceeded. Going over that number causes a luxury tax penalty to kick in based on how far over the number a team goes and how many years they stay over that number. Even with the cap expected to rise, several teams are already way over it, including the Cavaliers. If there's one thing Dan Gilbert hasn't been afraid to do, it's spend money on the team. Neither has Golden State, who are paying enough luxury tax to almost afford a house in Oakland. And this is ultimately what the Bron-erfly effect leads to. The Cavaliers are paying maximum money to James, and after the title in 2016, essentially shelled out thank you contracts to the likes of J.R. Smith and Tristan Thompson, which make them even harder to move without straight up cutting them. Even with general managers like David Griffin in the past and Kobe Altman now pulling some wizardry to make trades to try and help the team, they have next to no flexibility to go after marquee names and have to settle for really young players or vets playing on short-term minimum deals. In other words, it happened again. As for where LeBron ends up going now, if I'm LeBron, I have 3 things I'm looking for. 1. A team that offers a max contract. 2. A team whose front office isn't a total clown show. I'm looking at you, Dan Gilbert. And 3. A team that could feasibly win a title if I join them. The first one counts out a dozen or so NBA teams, and the third another dozen, so options are actually pretty limited, in spite of how many teams gutted their rosters to clear a landing spot for him. The 76ers have been brought up several times as a potential landing spot, but then their team's president of basketball operations resigned after feeding information to his Twitter trolling wife. And in spite of a largely young, promising core, James just finished a season dealing with one J.R. Smith. If the series against Boston was any indication, the Sixers could have up to 3 sentient clutch-time brain farts on the court at any given time. Golden State has been mentioned too, but you'd have to be pretty spineless to sell out and go there just for a couple of oops. LA has come up, namely the Lakers, what with LeBron having a home out there. If James really wants to get away from off-court sideshows, he would want to stay as far away as possible from the Ball family. San Antonio? Maybe, if they shed some of their rapidly aging roster. Houston remains a decent possibility if they hold on to their key players, and I'm sure they would love to have LeBron come playoff time so James Harden doesn't spill his spaghetti all over the court when his team needs him the most. I would say Portland so he could team up with Lillard and McCollum, but they're even further over the cap than Golden State, and have very few options to do much about it. Either way, if James does end up leaving C-Town, I won't have any hard feelings about it. He came back, delivered on a promise, and now he has little reason to stay other than hometown pride. Short of Dan Gilbert just straight up selling him majority ownership of the team, I think he's gone. Thanks for the memories, LBJ.